So welcome to Dharma After Dark, and I just wanted to share a few thoughts that I've had recently. As primarily I've been thinking about why we embark on the spiritual path in the first place. I think for many people, then the reason why we search for the truth is because we encounter suffering, difficulties in suffering. So that could be physical illness, depression, trauma, that sort of thing. And I think this is one of the most common reasons why people embark on the spiritual journey. And so in some ways, then the root of it is suffering. And this is also what the Buddha taught, that first you have to understand the truth of suffering. I think that's something that we can all accept, that there is suffering. We all experience suffering to a greater or lesser degree. But it's undeniable that that exists. Now, we cannot prove that it is possible to go beyond all suffering. In fact, many people would claim that that is a naive idea, that we can actually go beyond suffering or achieve a permanent state of happiness, which is called nirvana in the Buddha Dharma or in the Hindu tradition. So whether or not there's something called nirvana or transcendence, we can leave that aside. But we can accept that we experience suffering. And so there's two questions. Why is there suffering? What is the cause of suffering? And how do we eliminate suffering, or at least reduce it? And there's many different answers depending on who you ask. In general, then the traditional Christian answer is that in order to achieve final happiness in heaven, then we have to retain our devotion and faith in God, and also follow the Word of God. Now, what God teaches is not mistaken. For example, you shouldn't kill, you shouldn't steal and lie, and that sort of thing. But the entire position that the universe was created by a benevolent and supreme being, and that that supreme being had a purpose in creating suffering and evil, is questionable. It's something I have a lot of difficulty with. I think a lot of people have difficulty with this position. And likewise, it's something then that I rejected at a young age, because it didn't make sense to me that a supreme and omniscient being would intentionally create evil people and then send them to hell, when that omnipotent individual would be able to determine in advance what the outcome would be. So it kind of doesn't make sense to me. It's a little bit like this God is playing games, creating this kind of play universe in which there are good people and bad people, and then letting them live out their lives. And at the end, the coming of the judgment day, and some permanently go to heaven and some permanently go to hell. Also the notion that there's an independent and self-empowered individual or soul that has free will that can be created by this godlike creature seems a bit strange to me, right? Because somehow we're sort of like puppets, right? And also, unless we believe that there are past and future lives, then it's difficult to explain why some people, when they're born, have a naturally negative disposition. For example, some young children like to cause harm to animals, from a young age. They haven't been taught to do that. Whereas other children are extremely loving, kind, and gentle beings from the day they're born. Of course, the scientific position is that things are random. I mean, most scientists believe this, that a random series of events came together and produced this kind of illusion of sentient life, self-aware consciousness. Well, of course, then many scientists themselves are Christians, but their impression of what God is something different. Perhaps some scientists believe God represents the laws of the universe. But we're always stuck with the same problem. It's like, where did God come from? Where did the laws of the universe come from? Now, the general position that's held in the scientific community is that if we can increase our knowledge, then we will be able to overcome all human woes. All our troubles will be solved. And in this regard, then I have to say most scientists are quite naive, because they disregard human nature. Everything is seen to be somehow scientifically qualifiable and quantifiable. And they disregard this natural human nature we have that is unpredictable. And so this sort of feeling is, if we can develop unlimited sources of energy, solve the problems of illness and pollution and that sort of thing, and then people will stop fighting. But as I said, this is incredibly naive. However, the position that was given by the Buddha, in my mind anyway, to my understanding, is far more kind of profound, has far greater insight into what is called human nature, but also into the nature of phenomena, the nature of the universe. I mean, that is instinctually present within the mind of the average scientist, who tends to be quite intellectual. So, to give you a simple example then, years and years ago, then it was claimed by scientists that if we could develop nuclear power, then we would end the world's problems, because people would no longer have to fight over this sort of source of energy. We'd have unlimited energy to do whatever we wanted, and so people would no longer have to fight. But this is kind of just ignoring this huge area, this huge issue within society, and that is that human beings have these negative emotional tendencies, right? So even if we all had what we needed, enough food, enough energy, enough clothing, etc., that sort of thing, shelter, that we wouldn't then fight is kind of totally naive, right? Because people have this need to be superior to others. That's a negativity. That's an emotional negativity, right? It's not something virtuous. It's a natural tendency to want one's own status to be higher and others lower. And we're kind of very primitive in this way. And part of the problem is that our politics are more or less kind of founded on these principles. You know, in general, then politics are a kind of team sport, as far as I can see. Party politics, it's like being on a football team. And then it's almost as if it doesn't matter what you do as long as you beat your enemy. You know, other politicians are seen to be your enemy. This is a very backward and primitive way of thinking. It's very negative, and it leads to a lot of negativity. Especially these days, it's like the truth doesn't matter anymore. It's absolutely fine to lie, as long as that lie will be sort of helpful in defeating my enemies. But this is a really dangerous and slippery slope. So what the Buddha taught was, the problem, the source of our problem is our kleshas. So this term klesha means negative emotion or negative tendency. And that's not the original root. The original root is what's taught to be fundamental ignorance. That's the sort of source of everything. But the sort of obvious problem is that we have these negativities. We have jealousy and pride, and anger, aversion, greed, that sort of thing. And so although some people like to suggest that we'll be much better off if we can colonize another planet, for example, colonize Mars, then in terms of what the Buddha taught, then it's not going to make any difference. Because as long as we take with us these negative emotions or negative tendencies, then even if we go to Mars, it's not going to make things better. Because we'll just establish sort of non-virtuous or imperfect societies on Mars. There'll be 2 planets that are infected with negativity. And so what the Buddha taught is that we have to get down to the root of it, and that is we have to remove our negative tendencies. It's our anger and our greed, our ignorance, our jealousy, our pride, our doubt, those sort of things that cause our problems. That's not hard to imagine, right? The scientific position is as long as we progress scientifically, then eventually we'll get to a point where the world will be some kind of utopia. But we can imagine a very primitive world, let's say, you know, this kind of image of like Garden of Eden, where we just share everything and put our energies into providing the bare minimum and live happy and harmonious lives. That would be quite idyllic. No one can deny that. Of course, we'd still be subject to sickness, etc. But really, we're all going to die sometime, right? And I think as long as you die happy, and as long as your communities and societies are harmonious, then that's not a huge problem. Also, we have this tendency to think that it's all about whether we become extinct or not. But really, eventually, it's just inevitable that we will be extinct. And it's quite far-fetched, but we have this feeling like if we can just sort of spread out into the universe, colonize other planets, and then we'll have a greater chance of surviving into the future, millions and millions of years from now. But at the same time, our progress could be the most dangerous thing to our future survival. Like I said, in the olden days, it's not so olden days, I suppose, for me, but we were told that if we could develop nuclear energy, it would solve all the world's problems. But it was the single factor that had brought us the closest we've ever been to self-destruction, right? I remember this. I was brought up in the Cold War. And I remember on 3 different occasions hearing about these false launch detections where the world had been brought to 3 or 4 minutes from destruction because of a mistaken detection of a missile launch. So really, it was our progress scientifically that brought us to the brink of destruction. And especially as long as we've got the negative emotions. So a big part of the spiritual path is this. It's about getting rid of these negative tendencies that humans have. And what the Buddha taught is that this is possible. I mean, it seems like it's impossible, right? But the practice is there that can help us to become better human beings and to transform our anger and our jealousy and our pride into positive things like love and compassion. We can all see that if everyone had bodhicitta, if everyone had this love and compassion, then the world would be a very different place. If we always put others first and not thought about ourselves, then really there would be no cause for us to come into conflict with each other. To my mind anyway, if it is the case that this is the only life we have, right? This is all we've got. There's nothing more than this. Then the most important thing would be for us to live in harmonious and loving and caring societies. Because eventually death is going to come. Cancer will come, or we'll just die of old age. There's so many causes for death. What matters is whether or not you are content, happy, whether you are cared for and loved when the time comes. Because what's certain is we can't defeat death. We can't go beyond death in worldly terms. It's going to overtake each and every one of us. Even if we prolong human lifespan to thousands of years, eventually we will cease to exist. But we don't invest ourselves in what's important. We are kind of really impressed by progress and power, wealth, development. And we don't consider these simple qualities like loving kindness and compassion, care, harmony, tranquility to be so important. So anyway, it's just a few thoughts I wanted to share with you. And I don't really want to go on too much. So thank you for listening to me, and see you again next time.